All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this webinar on Boost Your Online Learning with Behavioral Science. I'm very happy to introduce Rupal, who is joining me. Before I get to introduce Rupal, I would like to tell you a little bit about our NSC IMA Center for Behavioral Science. This is a center within IIM Ahmedabad that was started with a grant from National Stock Exchange of India. We are the first of its kind center that uses neuroscience and behavioral science and applies it to fields like economics, finance, human resource management, organizational behavior, and marketing. We use not only behavioral science tools, but we also happen to have a lot of state-of-the-art neuroscience tools that we use. And as a part of our mandate to spread awareness and bring more knowledge into the field of behavioral science, we do different webinars. And one of those webinars is today that we are doing based on behavioral science and online learning. And the reason behind it is online learning has become extremely popular, not only in academia, but also in the industry, with a lot of organizations actually investing heavily in online learning. And unfortunately or fortunately, learners within this community often fall off the track and not actually complete courses because it's very democratic and easy to join. So we thought, why not talk about what kind of behavioral science tools can we use to actually boost online learning for people who are also learning and also for organizations who want to invest. And who better than Coursera, which is by far the most, it is basically synonymous with online learning. And I'm very happy to have Rupal Nair with us today. Rupal heads content and credentials for Coursera Asia Pacific. Rupal leads online degrees as well as university and industry partnerships to develop online certificates and degrees to enable more learners to achieve greater momentum and success. Before joining Coursera, Rupal was with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, where she developed scalable and affordable digital learning solutions in higher education. Rupal is an Acumen Fellow and holds an MBA from Haas Business School, UC Berkeley. And she has an MSc in International Finance and Economics from University of Warwick, UK. And she has a bachelor's degree in economics from St. Xavier's College, Mumbai. And she's also a good friend of mine. So thank you for joining us, Rupal. And Rupal, we'll start off with you and talk about how Coursera deals with online learning and how it ensures that learners are engaged and come back to complete their courses.
Right. Thanks, Aditya, for kicking us off and for the very thoughtful introduction. Hi, everyone. It's wonderful to meet you here and looking forward to also hearing your thoughts in chat or your questions or the way you look at this in your life and work as you see fit. So Aditya, I think even before I share what we do, I think what's really important to understand is that research on the way our learners behave on platform, the way they enroll, the way they learn, the way they go on to complete or not complete is really at the core of Coursera. Many of you might be familiar, but just to kind of take a step back, at Coursera, we have about more than 120 million learners that are enrolled on platform from around the world. We have more than 300 university and industry partners that are authoring the content. And then we have 5,000 plus corporates or campuses around the world that are consuming the content that our university and industry partners are really creating. So the only way that this kind of cycle can continue to iterate and grow is if we are really, what we call at Coursera, learner first, and really think about the learner her journey, her life, her trials, her tribulations, to understand how to meet her where she is. And so as part of that, and I know that chat is disabled, so maybe I'll share with Aditya to share out later. We do a lot of research. We have a teaching and learning team who are essentially learning scientists who spend a lot of their day really thinking of this exact question that Aditya has posed. And fairly recently, about a year a year and a half ago, we've launched about 2 reports. So for those of you that are more statistically inclined, I recommend reading a lot into the reports. One of them is called Drivers of Quality in Online Learning. So it really looks into our 200 million plus enrollments over 9 years to understand what determines whether learners enroll, they learn, and they go on to persist. And then the other is the same work, but in degrees, in online degrees, right? So just to get the conversation started, I'll share a couple of thoughts of it there. Something that's core to our research and finding is that learners are able to engage and really persist if they find their own goal and path. So if they start strong, if they learn at their own pace, right? Don't hurry. And if they keep coming back. Now, what do I mean with that? If you start strong? So for learners who we see are persisting at the cadence of the course in the first 2 weeks, they're twice more likely to complete than the other learners. So the first 2 weeks in the open courses or MOOC world are really important. If you extrapolate this to online degrees, it's interesting, it's very similar. The first semester, the first term in online degrees is very similar. If you are persisting through the first semester, first term, you're more likely to persist throughout. So we spend a lot of time thinking about how to ensure the learner is setting his or her own goals and really focusing on persisting in the initial part of the MOOC or the degree, and then learning at your own pace. One of the interesting findings, right, is if we had thought that if we introduce watch at 2x speed, 4x speed, folks are going to binge watch and pretty much complete but not solve assessments. What we've realized is that if folks are persisting through the first 2 weeks, they're actually more likely to come back, solve, engage, and they don't so much as use the 2x, 3x, skip things. And then finally, if you're not rushing and if you're engaging frequently. So I'll start there, but that's been some of our core findings. If you are a learner, what do you do to ensure that you're on track and that we don't lose you, unfortunately, like you say, along the way?
Thank you, Rupan. Rupan, I have a couple of questions. So when we talk about learning at your own pace, and yes, it makes a lot of sense from the behavioral side that people are more motivated when they find the journey more enjoyable rather than the end goal. So people who are more focused on the journey itself, they're intrinsically motivated. Do you think that also plays a role in how challenging or unchallenging they find a course?
Yeah, I think that's interesting. What we've seen is that it has more to do with their ability to calendar or schedule, and less to do with how challenging or not. And I'll get to the idea of scaffolding, which is the idea of if you're finding something challenging, what have we observed to help learners persist? But Aditya, I think what it has to do with is, so now that we know that, if learners persist in the first 2 weeks, they're more likely to complete, how do we take that from a tooling nudging standpoint? And that might help you visualize, right? So when a learner starts off, we help the learner calendar or schedule. How many times a week do you want to learn? Do you want to learn twice a week, thrice a week, 5 times a week? We let the learner kind of choose their pace. Then at the end of the week, the learner receives kind of an email of insights that gives them a reflection into their past week and a plan of how to approach their week to come. So the learner might get an email insight that says, hey, Wonderful. You said you wanted to learn thrice a week. You're on track. Great job. Continue. Or you might get a email, which I have a few times, to be honest. Hey, you're behind your timelines. Do you want to reset your goal? So what we've seen is that if we are sending nudges like those, one, helping folks initially set a clear path. I want to learn thrice a week. I want to learn 5 times a week. Or if you're not learning at that course correcting that, consciously, intentfully revising that timeline, and then sending you insights to say on your cell phone, etc. Hey, maybe you're not on track. Do you want to revise it? This is what your future will look like. Folks will be more on path. Coming to your point on, is it challenging or not? I think it's a very interesting point. We've seen that learners actually want to be challenged. They are more likely to engage and complete if there are industry or real world applications, quizzes in coding or technical assignments. There's more kind of real world applications. And what we call at Coursera is scaffolding. So, it's one thing to test a learner, to challenge them, which they appreciate, but how do you build enough scaffolding around it? How do you build the right amount of reading, watching, and feedback so that the learner doesn't feel lonely in the online journey, but is really supported with scaffolding? I'll maybe share an example, right? So, and this is an online degree example, but you could extrapolate it to a Python course, etc. So we have University of London has a degree, and it's a technical degree. And so, for instance, they have a lot of applications which are around, introduction to programming. So they ask learners to build a detective game, and it's called Sloth. And all of the students build a detective game where they do the Sherlock Holmes style of thing. So it's pretty challenging. But the faculty are there to help them understand, or the TAs are there to help them understand the basics to apply. And then after that, there is a discussion forum where the learners don't just debrief on the way they built the game, but also what were the challenges, what were the stress points, what were the tension points. What we found is that if learners are engaging in discussion forums and talking to one another about their challenges as well as accomplishments, they're 25% more likely to engage and complete. So I know I gave you a bit of a long-winded answer. But I actually think those are two different things. Goal-orientedness and to be challenged and supported are two very different things.
Yeah, so both seem to be important to boost online learning. Now I'm going to take slide this. So if and though this is a very good course on Coursera by Susan Duckworth, where she talks about grit. Mm-hmm. And she talks about, so do you think it is just about individuals and grit? So those who are gritty would be more likely to complete, and those who are less gritty are less likely to complete? I wouldn't really agree with my own assessment, but it could be argued that it's just about grit.
Yeah, it's a good question, and I don't think we've done any data analysis around that. So I'm sure if any Coursera teaching and learning folks are logging in here, they're going to hold me accountable if I give you a kind of a data-driven answer, Aditya. But I will share that a simple example of that is we're doing some early research around how women learn. Right. And we all know, for instance, in a lot of STEM or harder areas, you don't find a lot of proportion of women. When we've done that early research, what we've actually learned is, and it's not yet published, etc., hopefully we'll share that soon, is that women talk a lot about, again, goal-orientedness and time as a constraint, or their own perception or self-confidence of the way they perceive it. So I think, Aditya, it's probably less about grit. It's more about how do you identify with yourself? And I think in kind of your learning science language, it's really around the pre-commitment understanding, right? Like if you identify yourself as an athlete, you're more likely to go partake in adventure sports, etc. So I actually wonder if it's more about grit or it's more about, do you perceive yourself to be goal-oriented, gritty, etc.? And then the question, not just to Coursera, but to all of us as educators, online or offline, is how do we help learners, whoever they are, match their perception of who they really are, to be on the path.
Thank you. So I had a couple of questions. So when people don't, when you don't meet your own targets on Coursera that you have set for yourself, you usually get emails saying that, hey, you have not completed week 1, you should have completed it. So you get both positive and negative nudges.
Yeah.
Do you feel, or do you find that these nudges have actually improved the learner completion and the learner completion of the course rate?
Yeah, so we've actually found, and I'll not share an email nudge example, like I'll share something maybe perhaps more provocative. I actually don't know who's in the audience, but if you're an educator, you're probably thinking about this all the time. We do think that nudges make people a lot more self-aware. And I'll share an example. As educators, whether it's online or on campus, I know everyone is constantly thinking about plagiarism, right? And especially in the MOOCs world, even before you come to it, let me come to it. Folks are thinking about, hey, even if you complete, is your work authentic? Is your work real? And so we've been experimenting a lot with it, and especially in the time during the pandemic when Coursera opened up our platform to all kind of students enrolled in campuses, right? Because learners around the world were really struggling, etc. So we said, hey, if you're a student enrolled in the campus, you can learn for the time during the pandemic persists for free on Coursera. So in that time, we had lots and lots of learners in the tune of millions who enrolled. So now we saw a lot of these learners, and of course we saw an uptick in plagiarism across all kinds of courses, because of course, like colleges around the world, colleges and schools around the world tried to offer credit for courses. So we started to experiment with, hey, what can we do to detect and control plagiarism, but continue to help learners persist, right? So it doesn't mean that we want to hold back. Now, one is, of course, using plagiarism detection tools where we can actually authenticate. The second is, can we be a little bit interesting, smarter about it, and do some nudging? So what we've actually found, Aditya, is that, let's say a learner is just about to submit an assignment, and we use Turnitin and a few other tools, and we do a check internally on the platform, or to check to see if it's an authentic assignment or not. Now, if the assignment is not authentic and we see a significant amount of overlap with someone else's assignment, we actually send a nudge to the learner saying that we can tell that this is not an authentic assignment. Know that if you submit it, your faculty will know. At that point, we see a significant drop in learner submissions of that assignment. Now, let's say that the learner actually is ready to submit. Now, the moment the learner is ready to submit, even if and we know that it's plagiarized, we send another nudge to them that the moment you submit it, your faculty will know that this is plagiarized, and you will not get the grade that you're hoping for. With these nudges, we've seen plagiarism go down by 75%. So it's a different example, but it's again like helping accountability in learners, reminding them of what's visible, what's not, actually is helping us along the way. And it's really important at that scale, because again, bringing us back to NEP and stuff. If we have to enable and build access for double our gross enrollment ratio and enable access for millions of learners, we have to be able to do this at scale. So yes, in our early initiatives, we are beginning to see some results, but there's a long way to go.
That is a great example, because one of the major findings in behavioral science is when people are given the chance to be dishonest, they will be dishonest. I also noticed on Coursera, you put out a small disclaimer saying just before somebody gives a test, you have a small disclaimer there saying that I promise to complete this by myself without any plagiarism. And I think that is a very great priming example where you are priming learners to say that, hey, listen, you have to do it by yourself. Don't forget about it. It's a great way of, well, it may not eliminate plagiarism, but as you are rightly saying, at that scale, eliminating plagiarism completely is going to be extremely difficult as is. Um, that was a great example. All right, now we talk about all these learners coming in. How do we ensure that learners are actually engaged in the course? What kind of cues or behavioral tools can we use to ensure that learners who are coming in are content? So content is just one part of it, but what can we do to ensure that they are engaged?
Yeah. Um, and, I was thinking about this question a little bit, and, I also wonder what you've heard even outside of online learning, right? Because the interesting thing is that the question also applies for in other industries that are online or offline. Like, you can make one purchase, but how do you continue to come back? How do you engage with that purchase, whether it's the Netflix world or whether it's kind of even, purchasing a newspaper subscription, etc. I think the core of it is really, first, it begins with matching the learner with the right topic, ensuring that the learner is able to discover, identify, enroll in the right course. There's a lot of experiments and a lot of conversations, a lot of courses, but it's not by default. How do we ensure that the learner is really finding the right content, right? Whether it's a short course or a project or a degree or a certificate or whatever that is. I think it really starts there, because if you're not enrolled in something that truly interests you, challenges you, helps you find a better job, a promotion, a better disposable income, you are likely to drop off anywhere. So I think it starts there. And of course, I think at Coursera, we have a long way to go, but what we really care about is building a personalized learning platform. So how do we ensure that we surface the right content to you along your journey? Because if you're not doing that, then how are you going to find the right content? So that's the first thing. Then I think along the way, there are multiple things. So we talked about challenges and assessments and quizzes, right? Something that we've seen is really important to learners is, yes, you can quiz them, but something that's important to engagement is quiz level feedback. Now, I might try a quiz, I might get it wrong, but if you just give me like a red cross there, my confidence might be impacted, I might disconnect and go away. However, if along with, hey, you didn't get it right this time, I get some quiz level feedback, try it this way, think of it this way, go back to XYZ case study, or I tried 2-3 times, the fourth time I get an answer, then you're almost engaging with the learner. And that's something that we're working on. We have a couple of ways to do that on platform already, and we really encourage faculty to think about that while engaging with the learner, because and I think this is something that I think a lot about in terms of testing, right? Like quizzes and testing, at least in India and even around the world. It's almost like make it as difficult as you want. And I don't know about you, but growing up, I was very intimidated by tests, right? Like I went to Berkeley for business school, but I've given my GMAT more than once and twice, purely because it's just very intimidating. So how do you make it less intimidating? How do you make it a learning journey? Is like another thing. Third is industry relevance, right? How do we, learners today, and you might find this interesting, what we're seeing is that learners want to enroll more and more in content that has direct industry relevance, that has industry folks coming and applying what is being said to the real industry, to case studies, to how do they apply it to their jobs every day. And so how do we make it industry relevant? And then finally, I'll talk about like things like discussion forums, right? And here I'll share a personal example. So we have a course on Coursera, and I encourage you all to go see it. This is not a Coursera advertisement. It's just a very thoughtful, meaningful course. It's by Vic Stretcher, from Professor Vic at University of Michigan. It's called Finding Purpose and Meaning in Life. He came out with it during the pandemic. He has a book on purpose, and it was really about, during a tough time, how do folks take a step back and think about their purpose with generally the science of purpose. So one of the exercises that he does is he makes you visualize, after sharing with you the science of purpose, he asks you a question. If you were to die tomorrow, what do you think, in one line, what would you want your epitaph to say? Epitaph, for folks, who are thinking, is if you have a kind of a death tombstone, what is one line that it would say? And he himself gives an example, right? And his example is that his epitaph would say that he danced his way through life in every occasion. And so that was very interesting, because I remember when I was taking it, I thought about, hey, what would I generally want it to say about me? But that exercise to do just by myself in isolation and then go away is something different. However, there was a group discussion forum, and I remember I knew that I was going to go post my epitaph because I wanted to see what others were going to say. So I was a lot more thoughtful about what I was going to say, and I was really keen to see what others said. And that group discussion kind of led to a more poignant conversation, and a lot of people talked. So again, how do you engage conversation? And of course, I'm not even talking about online degrees. There it goes to a different pace, right? Like Slack, Zoom, etc. So those are some examples of how to keep folks engaged.
Thank you, Rupal. That was a great example, and we also have courses, but as a fan of his, that's a very good course. All right, let me ask you one more thing, since we are talking about discussion forums. One of the most interesting features that I have found on Coursera, as a student and as a faculty, was peer review. And in economics or in literature and even in management, we talk about the problem of the common resource problem, where somebody's slacking off, and that's why we do the peer review. But Coursera looks at peer review very different. Do you feel that the peer review, everybody wants to be nice, or people actually give feedback?
Yeah, and I think, Aditya, we can have a conversation on giving and receiving feedback fundamentally, all day long. There's different behavioral sciences around it. I think that what we've seen is that, look, there's all kinds of learners, right? And some will want to just hurry through it. But most often we've seen that because they care about the feedback that they receive, the review they receive, they internalize, right? What does it really imply when sharing feedback with someone else? I think what's more important, or let's say equally important, that we internalize at Coursera is in that environment where the scale of learning is so much that you either have to use auto-graded assignments or peer reviews of some kinds, or quizzes or multiple choice questions. How do you really ensure all of that is really adding to the skill development of the learner, right? And which is where kind of assessment dashboards, etc., come in, that faculty and TAs have access to. So for instance, we have these dashboards where a TA or a faculty, or yourself, like Ahmedabad has MOOCs, of course, can go in and see that, okay, in this course or in this module, which are the courses where majority folks are not completing an assessment or an assignment, right? And they can drill down on that and then understand, why is that the case? Is it because peer reviews are not coming in? Is it because something is tough? And then they can, do even a double drill down on that and go in to understand that, okay, so, majority folks are not completing the quiz. How many learners have taken it? What is the average number of attempts to complete it? What is the average score that people get? How many people are left? I think so coming back to your question, I think it's equally about that question as it is about looking at the data and really thinking about how to leverage data to enable learners at scale.
And thank you, Rupal. So yeah, you You actually gave me a very great answer, because one of the important things that we talk about in behavioral science is receiving feedback. Um, and so, though it's not related, but for even people who get bad performance upgrades or bad performance reviews, their usual problem is not that they have got a bad rating, it's because they have not been explained why they have got a bad rating, which is essentially very different from getting a bad rating.
Yeah.
Uh, uh, Rupal, one of the things that I have in general, as you see more and more online platforms coming, especially for learning, right? E-learning coming, we see that Coursera has basically stayed the course uh, over a period of many years now. And learners keep coming back, learners keep learning a lot more. And what is your thoughts around things like gamification of e-learning and
Yeah.
courses?
Um, I think it's interesting, and it probably, it kind of goes back to the goal setting. I think gamification can, um, it's really about internalizing how do you meet the learner where they are, and how does gamification apply to where they are. So I think, again, the idea of goal-orientedness, right? Like, I think you made an interesting point, Aditya, that folks, people like to get to places faster. I think what we're actually seeing at Coursera is that when learners know that the finish line is nearer, they're more likely to make an effort to get to the finish line. And that kind of goes back to your question, like gamification can come in multiple ways. Leaderboards, LinkedIn, you'll see in places like that, or multiple, like Khan Academy, you'll see the green,
Yeah.
used to be the green leaf earlier. And at Coursera, for instance, you have that course completion, there's this circle. So hey, you're 30% there, you're 70% there, etc. And I think it's very important, but I think it again has to go back to being learner first. I do think that we've tried multiple things in the Coursera community, like leaderboard, who finishes fast, etc., over the years, over the course of the last 10 years. But what sticks most, what we've seen, is going back to the learner journey and meeting them really where they are. And I imagine your question gets even more and more important with things like ChatGPT and stuff coming into play, right? Like, the core question is, how do you leverage technology to enable learners, as well as I would even say academia or subject matter experts, to kind of really teach, and then learners to really enable and embrace everything that they have to teach. And gamification is probably one element of technology.
Thanks, Rupal. Yeah, I must agree with you with that behavioral science, actually motivation is one of the most beautiful areas, and how do humans get motivated is a brilliant area of research that exists. And yes, you're right. Progress, or seeing that I have made progress, is extremely important. Uh, I found something very interesting in the way Coursera lets you set your own goals. So one of the one of my pet research areas used to be, why do people not meet their goals? So for example, New Year resolutions. People set on the 1st of Jan, but by maybe, if you're good enough, by February, some of them have been missed, or they have been forgotten about, or they're no longer there. And it's very interesting because we don't see the progress, one, or two, there are obstacles, which you very nicely said that, hey, look, we have a lot of women learners who want to take these technical courses, but they also have other things to do in life. And these obstacles essentially would kind of put you off your goal. But in Coursera, you can say, hey, can I change my goal depending on my current life situation, which would still keep me engaged and motivated to come back and complete the course. All right, let me. So you have both learners who come directly to Coursera, and you also have learners who come through business partner, not business partner, organizations, business organizations, or organizations in general who come through Coursera. Now, obviously, you must be seeing these trends that happen, right? Uh, if there is some in some years it will be all about data science, in some years it will be all about something else, finance. Then suddenly we are talking about AI and machine learning now. When these trends happen, as a platform, you can't really predict it. Well, you can, but it's very difficult to be very certain. So, nor do businesses know what. How do you generate? How do you engage faculty to come and make some courses around this?
Yeah, that feels like a question that's bigger than my shoes, Aditya, but I will take a attempt at it. I will, I want to share a thought on something that you were sharing earlier about why people don't meet their goals. I wonder, and this is something, again, not measured, etc. Something to think about is, are people being honest about their goals? Maybe their goal is not, and I'm the reason I'm saying this is because there's a lot of questioning around MOOC completions, etc. Maybe someone's goal is not to complete the course. Maybe someone's goal is, I am an engineer. I have to do a project on this specific language. I don't want to complete the full course. I just want to complete this specific week on this specific language so that I can go get stuffed on that project. Or someone's goal is like, my goal could be, pandemic has happened. I have to do change management on my team. I want to go and understand how change management happened at Apple and how it didn't happen at BlackBerry, right? And I want to apply. In that case, one has to be honest with their goal. My goal is not to complete. My goal is to go understand that specific module. So I think I wanted to add that to your perspective. Like, are we being honest about our goal, or are we just being superficial? Now, coming back to your question on trends and things, I don't think we're in the place to kind of really. I don't think Coursera is in the place to tell faculty what they do, what to do. I think we genuinely consider ourselves as kind of the data map of 120 million learners on platform, 7,000 plus enterprises who are logging in. How can we ensure all of this data and all of our learnings via all of this research reaches yourself and others at institutions, et cetera, in a timely way? And you probably know the answer to this question, but something that we do at Coursera a lot is really look at the data on platform. So all of the 120 million learners who are on platform are constantly going and searching in what they want to learn, right? And we are also saying, hey, what are you searching for? Then what do you find and what do you click on? And then if you don't find something, what do you go and click on? And so based on all of that, and then we look at all of the new technologies, the jobs, what's growing in the market, and we put all of that together to then say, hey, what is it that learners are really looking for, which is a gap on not just Coursera and everywhere else that we can share with faculty that they can build. No prizes for guessing that right now it's all about AI and ChatGPT. And then, of course, once we do that, as you know, we work with faculty on any further nuances on what might learners be looking for. Is it ChatGPT for health? Is it, ChatGPT prompt engineering, etc.? What is it that folks are looking for? And then, of course, there's the teaching and learning world, where we share all of the data and research and insights that, we've been talking about. How do learners learn better online? Of course, on-campus faculty know so much more than what we already do.
Thank you, Rupal. Rupal, this is my last question before we open it for Q&A. I personally am a believer in online learning, at least the asynchronous part, where I think, I don't think it will replace offline or in-person learning, but it's obviously a very, very good complementary learning method to have. What do you think is the future? And this is a general question, this is not related to behavioral science, but what do you think is the future of online learning?
Yeah, frankly, I think that the future of online learning is really the future of high quality learning, Aditya. And I would love to hear from you as well, right? Like I'd love for this to be an exchange. So I'll share an answer and then I'd love to hear from you. I'm sure the audience also wants to hear from you. Frankly, I think that in all parts of the world, there's not enough high quality learning to be had. There are not enough institutions like IIM Ahmedabad out there doing that high quality teaching. So the future of online learning is really ensuring that everyone who doesn't have access to high quality learning can have access to high quality learning today. Doesn't matter where they are, doesn't matter if they had opportunity to CAT training, GMAT training, GRE training or not, etc. How can everyone have access to high quality learning so that they can get a job that increases their quality of life and helps them go on the path that they want to? I think that and this is now a personal perspective, it's not a Coursera perspective. I think over the years, we've become, it's not just India, I think around the world, it's become a system of elimination over a system of access. And I think online learning is probably just one of the many ways that we can really enable access to so many learners. And I think if we can do that, we would just be contributing to a better future. What are your thoughts on the topic?
So my thoughts, and again, my thoughts are the best part about online learning is it democratizes learning. In the sense that anybody anywhere can access a course, but I really think that online learning, though there are multiple platforms, Coursera being one of them, but not all the platforms provide high quality learning. And I think that is something that will I feel that will be a huge difference in the future. But I think online learning really is very helpful because it increases the reach, not only for academics like me, but also for learners who can pick up skills that they otherwise would not have been able to because of whatever life circumstance. And the hope is that if it is democratized, just the way Coursera does it, where, hey, you can do the course for free, it is very helpful because hopefully it will improve the quality of life of people and help them at least, move up a couple of rungs wherever they are. So I think online learning, yes, is not a substitute for in-person, but it's definitely something that goes hand in hand with in-person. All right. Thank you so much, Rupal. We shall move over to the Q&A. So we have quite a few questions, not answers. We have quite a few questions. One of the questions is, how do you maintain the consistency to achieve the goal?
Yeah, I think that and I think this brings us back to the goal-orientedness for the learner, right? And I don't know who the question is coming from, but one of the if you're a faculty, for instance, and if you work with Coursera, and I wonder if you're from a different industry, what are the parallels you're thinking about? At Coursera, we are constantly, it doesn't matter if it's a degree or online degree or a course, of course, the magnitude is different. The building blocks is what we call mastery-based learning. The idea of mastery-based learning is that one as faculty or a subject matter expert thinks about starts with backward design. So you start thinking about what is the end learning objective of this course, of this module, of this specific bite of information I'm offering. Now, in order to reach that objective, what will prove to the faculty or subject matter expert that the learner has now accomplished that objective? And then now that I know that, what do I teach? in terms of videos, assessments, etc., in order to do that. So there's two parts of consistency. One is, of course, nudges and ensuring, the learner's on track and the first 2 weeks of persistence. But the other is also a design which is nicely scaffolded with starting with, hey, I'm walking in, I'm doing a course on purpose. What is the learning objective of this course? What are the assessments that is going to prove that I've mastered it? And what are the videos and readings? So it's a combination. What we find is it has to be a rigorous combination of platform nudging, tooling, as well as content quality and design and structure.
All right. The next question is from Divya Thakur. And actually, she has two questions. So let's. The first question is, since Swayam, and as I'm sure you know that Swayam is the Government of India portal, don't get access to learner data. How can we improve engagement rate, and what is the success rate in any MOOC platform as
well? Okay. So I can't speak for Swayam, but if I were you, I would really reach out to them and kind of, look for any kind of data that they can offer. Otherwise, I think, I would be very happy to share some of the drivers of quality reports that we found in our research, some of the things that I shared. And I think if you were to design in those ways, so for instance, one of the things that I haven't mentioned is we found that our courses that have majority completion are ones that have videos that are broken down into less than 10 minutes. The moment you have videos that are more than 10 minutes, a consumer learner kind of, attention capacity goes away. Majority of these learners could be students, could be working professionals, either which way they're doing multiple things at one time. So how do you catch their attention? So, more than happy to share some of these examples via those reports, and, you could feel free to leverage those. But I would also encourage you to look for some data if it exists.
So I being on both Coursera and on Swayam, one of the things that we realized is course design, and in the course design, kind of giving behavioral cues really helps in increasing learner engagement. So when I say behavioral cues, we don't mean giving exercises, whether it's thought exercise or an exercise where we say, hey, stop right now, take a pen and paper and think of something, write down examples, right? These are small behavioral cues where we are forcing the learner to suddenly think. And some of these things, and yes, obviously giving information that is much more bite-sized, or not bite-sized, but is still challenging enough. So when we, and the end goal is, because in motivational science, we very clearly know that people get motivated because they want to achieve mastery. So they're coming to a course because they want to achieve mastery. So moving and setting your objectives and then the content makes a lot more sense, whether it is Swayam or Coursera, at least from our end where we do both.
And I'll share an example before you go to the next question. Like, it's an IMA MOOC. So the leadership skills MOOC, I think it's one of my all-time favorite courses. That's by IIM Ahmedabad on Coursera. And I think Professor Vishal, like, one of the things that he does, which is an example of exactly what you said, it's I think in every module when he's explaining a concept, he will stop and say, hey, now take a pen and paper and write down what you reflect. And for instance, I still remember one of the things that he taught that really stayed with me was this idea of automaticity, which is the cycle of emotion stressors that leaders get stuck in and how that impacts the way that they show up at work and life. And he kind of said, after he explained the concept, he said, okay, write down take a pen and paper and write down, when was the last time that you were stuck in the cycle of automaticity? And I think even just those small moments, so that you're kind of encouraging the learner not to binge watch Netflix this, but to reflect, it can be so helpful. You're right.
All right, so the next question is, I was curious to see if there has been research on how cultural norms lead into learner engagement, whether it be the course they choose, how much they participate, and how well they perform on the content. Content in courses can be very limited to the instructor's own country and culture. Do we have insights about how the content can be made globally engaging?
Yeah, that's such a deep and poignant question. I don't think I will have enough information to cover all of that. And it's an important enough question that I'm going to go back and circle back with more information if I find it. But I'm sure this exists, right? Like just like the smallest example is of all of our learners on Coursera, we have maximum number of learners in India who learn on mobile than in any other country. 60% of our learners learn on mobile. That is such a cultural context, right? Even when we do online degrees on Coursera and we have exams, we will see, and those are proctored exams. So the proctor or the proctoring tool can detect when there is a cell phone in the proximity, right? And the cell phone is not supposed to be there. So the proctor will come in and say, hey, the tool detected a cell phone, why are you using the cell phone? And the individual will say that the internet, I don't have any other internet, I just have my personal hotspot, so I'm using that. Or the individual will say that I'm doing this exercise on my phone because there's one laptop being shared amongst like 5-6 people.
Yeah.
Just like that, I'm sure there are so many more such examples that you have to that have to be kind of regionally contextualized. I will also add that going back to Professor Vishal's like leadership skills course, it actually made me think that not every course actually needs to be global. I think every instructor, when they speak to their strengths and their cultural context, I think is able to make so much of an impact. Because what you will learn in terms of leadership skills when looking at the Mahabharata and the history and the culture, you will not learn when kind of learning from a faculty based in the US at Tuck or wherever, however wonderful they are. So I think we actually need all kinds of faculty to bring in their contexts. So that's one of my own personal learnings as a learner.
All right, so I'm going to ask this question because it's very interesting. Is there a significant difference between engagement rate and completion rate between paid and non-paid courses?
Yeah, that's a good question. So engagement and completion, any which ways are too different, right? Like completion is, and then we'll come to paid. That's the second part. Engagement and completion are different. Completion is you have completed, you have got a certificate. Engagement is you're persisting, you're active, you're going from one course to another course in the specialization, module to module, quiz to quiz, etc. Right? You're engaging in discussion forums, all of those things. There is definitely a marked difference in completion between paid and non-paid. A paid learner, based on all of our data, everything that is in front of us, definitely completes at a higher rate than a non-paid learner, even if you take financial aid learners in the mix, because this goes back to the basics of behavioral science, psychology, what we all observe. At least in our observation, we see that if you are paying, you're putting in a little bit of a commitment, you're putting in a little bit of a skin in the game, and therefore you're more likely to complete than if you haven't paid.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think you have differential pricing, right?
For
in Coursera for a MOOC.
So we have geo pricing.
No. I'm saying within let's say within India, you wouldn't have differential pricing on MOOCs, right?
It's the same price, yeah. Because
I suddenly had this thought that price also acts as a signal for quality. So if you price some courses higher than others, what happens?
Right. Right. And that's such a poignant point at the there, because what we've observed at Coursera, like we've had moments where we've had different institutions, industry, university faculty who will come to us and say, hey, we should be able to price our course and experiment in whatever we want. And then in that case, we would become a true aggregator of content and you would all be able to run your own prices. But then at that scale, it's hard to maintain consistency. But that's an interesting point.
Right. Then there is a related question, which is the to frequency of drop-offs. Have you seen that they vary based on the length of the course?
Hmm. Um, we've actually not, the length of the course when matched appropriately with the rigor and the difficulty or the challenge doesn't actually lead to so much of drop off. If for instance a course is teaching, let's say, advanced Python or applied data science with Python, and it is a, let's say, a 4-month specialization with 4 courses in it, which has the right scaffolding and combination of videos, reading, assessments, discussion forums, labs. We haven't seen, drop-offs as a result of length. However, if you don't give learners the flexibility that they need, then you do see a drop off, right? For instance, learners want to be able to download. There's a lot of learners in India who don't have bandwidth like we do right now. So they want to be able to go download so that they can go see the video, download, etc. So flexibility is a very important piece of completions, not so much length.
All right. So I think we have time for just maybe one more question. And let's see, there are tons of questions. We even if Rupal is not able to answer it right now, we will download all your questions and possibly just send it out, either I or Rupal, because some questions I don't know if they're for me or for Rupal. Uh, and okay, so let me just ask you this: do you think there is so this is from Richin, should online learning focus on minimalistic learning styles? Do educators ignore this by not identifying its impact and value? So do you think learning, the way educators, so we all use different styles. Some of us will be very concept heavy, some of us will just explain one concept very simply, not too many fancy diagrams. Do you think that plays a role in how courses are picked up or how learners actually get engaged?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Richard. Again, I'm going to go back to first principles. I actually don't think, it's in our place to really, faculty are great at what they do, and I think they should continue to do what they're great at. I will say, I think it's, at least in my perspective, it's less about minimalist or complex. It's more about the learner. Who is the learner that you're designing for, and how are they going to fully grasp the content? And I know we're at time, so I'll actually talk about a learner as an example. So for instance, like, this is a learner I recently met who has stayed in my mind constantly, right? To go back to even the future of online learning, how would you really design for her? She is someone who recently completed high school. She always wanted to do a computer science online degree. She has been doing different courses on Coursera. She applied to various different IITs, etc. Didn't get a great JEE score. She ended up going to NLS, one of the NLS campuses for a bachelor's in law, but she still has very clear idea that she wants to be a fighter pilot. So she applied to one of the online computer science degrees on Coursera. She got in, and now she's a learner who has just completed her 12th standard and is doing 2 degrees in parallel: on campus a law degree, and online a technical computer science degree. And in addition to that, she does a lot of courses on Coursera MOOCs, because I see her posting her certificates on LinkedIn. Now imagine for that learner who is so driven, and different learners are different. She has a goal in front of her. She has the hustle. You have to really think about who the learner is. And her life is packed. So how do you design for her such that she has the flexibility, the rigor, the understanding to meet her where she is in her journey? And I think beyond that, faculty are really great at what they do, which is why you're all IIM Ahmedabad. And I think, it's really about the learner. How can we think about the learner at the center of what we do is basically what I'd say.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much, Rupal, for sharing all your wonderful insights with us. And thank you for all those who participated. If I know we ran out of time, so we couldn't answer all your questions, but we will try to answer as many as possible. Thank you again for joining us at the NSC CBS NSC IMA Center for Behavioral Science webinar. And thank you, Rupal. And I know some people from Coursera team are there in the audience. So thank you, Coursera team. And wishing all of you a wonderful day. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Aditya. Thanks everyone for dialing in.